Welcome back, everyone, to not a live stream, but we are recording this one. But either way, I'm sure you recognize today's guest, and that is the one, the only, the anti-smark himself, Mr. Albert Albanese. That's right. What's up?
I'm doing good, man.
Yeah. Now I'm happy to have you back. I mean, not everybody might not be, but but I, for one, am happy to see you.
I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are very upset that we're doing this again.
Yeah. So. A lot of things have happened in the world of wrestling since last time you were around. I mean, clearly you're around and we've been talking since, but nevertheless on the show. So, I guess there's a lot of things to cover. There is the backstage turmoil in AEW. There's also the booking of one Liv Morgan that we're going to discuss. But of course, how could we not start off with the biggest news story in wrestling history? Vince McMahon has retired, and Triple H is now head of creative. So, Albert Albanese, what are your thoughts, Mr. Anti-Smark, Anti-IWC, Mr. Hating the Fanboys? Where are you at?
So, first of all, is this not crazy that for the first time in our lives, we're living in a world where Vince McMahon is not controlling creative for the WWE? Like, it feels wrong in, so many ways.
Your first time in your life, technically speaking, he wasn't in charge when I was born, but just let you know that.
I mean, that's a semi-technicality. He was still running the show.
But
Vince is now, from what it seems like, completely hands off the product. First of all, you gotta wonder what a guy who has had zero social life throughout his entire life is doing in retirement. Like, what does he do?
I don't know. I think his social life is the reason why he had to retire.
Well, we did see those pictures and videos of him having his birthday dinner with a couple of people, and it definitely wasn't his wife with him. So
I think they're like an old school couple that doesn't believe in divorce. From everything I've heard, it's like they haven't been like a couple in a very long time.
And I've heard the same thing, which, for me, I think Vince was on his way out anyway. And then with this happening, I think it was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. There's no, what am I going to do? I got to step away now.
But furthermore, now the funny thing is, actually on the live stream, I actually said if the one thing that might be an issue or whatever with WWE is Vince gets canceled, and then like a week later it happened. I'm like, well, I that was just a guess on my part. But anyway, moving forward though, he has a certain replacement in the creative department. His son-in-law Triple H. How have you been liking the product under Triple H's reign? I've had a more wait-and-see attitude personally. There are changes I noticed, and there are positive things too, but I want to let it settle in a little more because, I believe you've said it. Anybody can book like one storyline, one feud. How do you do in the long run, a year, 2 years? Even the greatest bookers of all time have gotten burned out. So anyway, but where are you on the Triple H?
Well, we've seen Booker of the Year, Tony Khan, starting to get, and we'll get into this with the AEW stuff, but he's starting to get a little bit of backlash from wrestling fans. Somebody who everybody defended every booking decision he's ever made. So, there's always going to be a finite amount of time where you're going to be on fire, and that fire is going to eventually go out. We saw it during the Attitude Era. We're seeing it, in this honeymoon phase with AEW. We saw it with Impact. With Triple H right now, though, I think that you're right. This is one of those things where we need to have a wait-and-see approach. But for what we've gotten so far, we've talked about a lot of the things that I wish would come back to WWE. And Triple H has given me a bunch of those things, which, credit where it's due. I hate to be the person who actually agrees with the internet here, but I think Triple H is actually doing a good job so far, and people seem to be enjoying the product a lot more since. Do I think it's perfect? No. I do think that, a lot of these people are counting like, well, there was more wrestling, actual in-ring action on this show than there ever was before. I don't care. Yeah. I don't care. Stop counting minutes of wrestling. I don't care. If the show is entertaining and it keeps me entertained from start to finish and there's 4 minutes of wrestling or 40 minutes of wrestling, I don't care either way. I just want to be entertained. And I pointed
out multiple times during the Attitude Era, there have been entire episodes where there was like 5 minutes and change of wrestling total combined. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people forget about that because that was a major complaint during the Attitude Era where people were counting the minutes and saying, I got 5 minutes total. Like, what is this?
And And here's the thing: I think what it's come to now is that a lot of these, new age, younger, smart fans, all they care about now is I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them care about work rate, and that's great. Work rate is fine. You want to see wrestling on your wrestling show? I totally understand it. But give me good stories above anything else. That's always been my thing. I don't care about the content, especially on a weekly wrestling show, especially in the WWE. I would rather see the bigger matches and the longer matches take place on pay-per-view. I'm spending $10 a month on Peacock for what? To get feud enders, to get, big matches, to get the marquee stuff on pay-per-view. I don't need to see these 30-minute matches on Raw every week. That being said, this past week, like I said, Triple H put on the most wrestling there ever has been, and the episode was enjoyable. But it was also more enjoyable because they keep telling stories. And I appreciate the fact that everybody who's out there seems to have a story. Even as much as Chad Gable and Otis this past week come out and they cut a promo before their match, and they're like, hey, we're actually going to start recruiting. That means that they're going to try to give the Alpha Academy a little bit more. Johnny Gargano comes out, he cuts a promo, and he reintroduces himself to the fan base. It's not like what we had a couple of weeks ago in AEW, where a guy who was a veritable unknown indie guy, Mance Warner, comes in, wins a battle royal, gets shown for 45 seconds on AEW television, and has a world title match. I didn't know anything about him. How am I supposed to get invested in that? In one promo, if I'm a person who's never seen NXT, I'm invested enough in Johnny Gargano because he seems like enough of a big deal, and he's had accomplishments, and I know who he is now. Oh, he was in NXT. He was this guy who was huge there. Now he's on Raw. Great. That's what I want. I want stories. And Triple H has given us stories. Dexter Lumis has been, parading around and doing this whole big thing that no one seems to know what's, the master plan is. Kidnapping The Miz. Karrion Kross comes back, and he's got an immediate, straight-to-the-top feud with Drew McIntyre. I mean, he's introducing people and putting these pieces of these puzzle together to make a bigger, better, grand scheme of things in WWE. As of now, I think he's doing great. Do I think that if he keeps going the way he's going, this is something sustainable? Not really. Sooner or later, they have to buckle down, focus on the talents that they already have, and formulate stories with all of these talents instead of just, doing what AEW. Essentially, a lot of people are very happy with WWE because it's been the AEW booking that they were happy with. Big giant debut. And, next week, big giant debut. And the next week, there wasn't a debut, but, they gave like a push. They gave a push to a talent because, Ciampa loses a match to Bobby Lashley on Raw for the U.S. title. So that means that he's, a made guy, just like Wheeler Yuta lost a match to Mox, and he's a made guy. It's not how we make stars. Is it a good step in the right direction? Yes, but you need sustainability. Until Triple H shows me that there's going to be sustainability, I'm still in a wait-and-see place with it.
We have completely switched roles because I swear you have become the smart guy and I'm on the other end. Look, there have been some positives. I also admit I haven't been as compelled to watch as much of the program. I'm still in I'll watch when something good happens. I'll catch the recap later. I'm not dedicating my life to the TV. But there are some things that are good for sure. But the loaded statement that you got. I got a lot of things. Number one, in terms of, I agree that storytellings are good. But as I said, I don't think it's a modern problem that people just want wrestling in their wrestling shows. They always have. Because as I said, during the Attitude Era, while I prefer it, and I do agree with you, I want to see the big blow-off pay-per-view matches. And I want less wrestling. I want the resolution to be at the pay-per-views. During the Attitude Era, people were complaining about that there was not enough wrestling. This is a complaint as old as time. There are always going to be people who want more wrestling in their wrestling shows. Number one. Number two, I also do agree, so I kind of like half agree with most of what you say. So I agree that there is supposed to be stories. I want you to give me a reason to care about what's happening, what's going on in the ring. I've been saying this too about Moxley. I feel like ever since AEW, forget about the matches for a second, just look at his feuds. When we looked at Dean Ambrose in WWE, did we know he wanted to win the championship? Yes. But we also knew that he wanted to win it off of Seth Rollins specifically even more. While he's now the first two-time AEW World Champion, has he had a motivation outside of the belt? Was there something driving him? Even specifically, what could have been interesting, with Jon Moxley recently admitting that he has struggled with addictions, and Punk also being straight edge, we could have had a story about that. Like, you know, we could have brought that into the fold, but there was no motivation other than the belt. And since becoming interim champion and since winning it, I don't really feel anything. So yes, I agree with you, but getting back on point, I agree with you that story is important.
Right, and to speak to that, the whole Mox story has just been, I'm just going to defend my championship against random opponent after random opponent. We're getting into the AEW thing that I don't like, where, again, rankings don't matter, because a lot of these guys that are getting world title shots aren't earning them through the rankings. They're just being handed world title shots. Meanwhile, that's what I was told the rankings were for. So there's no emotional investment in Mox. Do I like Mox's matches? Absolutely. Did I love the promo that he cut after he won the world title against Punk? That was awesome. But I'm not emotionally invested in anything he's done in the interim. I mean, the Blackpool Combat Club stuff with Jericho, yes, that was, you know, that I kind of got into a little bit because I like faction warfare. But give me a reason to think that or care that he's having a world title match. I didn't believe that any of the guys that challenge him could beat him. If the story doesn't make it seem like any of these guys are formidable challengers, I don't care. I'm not as invested.
And I agree with that. But furthermore to that, I also think logical, sensical storytelling is a must. I think the stories have to make sense, right?
Absolutely.
Well, then let me ask you this. How exactly does it make sense that they had, triple threat matches and the winners would face each other to determine who's the number one contender to get the right to face Bobby Lashley, and we get to see Tommaso Ciampa beat AJ Styles, but then right after that, AJ Styles gets a title shot against Bobby Lashley.
Completely
and no one
agree.
seems to have a problem with that. It makes no sense whatsoever. Diminishes the entire point. Well, you see, this is what I'm saying. These are the things about the Triple H booking that I think the rose-tinted glasses are preventing people from seeing. Because, while I do like the attention that the mid-card was getting, have we had the U.S. title be a major focal point since that AJ and Bobby Lashley match? Or are we already burnt out? Or are we already going back to the U.S. title not mattering as much?
I mean, it seemed to flip-flop because the Intercontinental title didn't mean anything, and now all of a sudden Gunther has this match against Sheamus. So why can't we keep the focus on both of them, though, you know? I like the idea of the triple threat matches to determine a number one contender, but you're right. Right after that, AJ Styles gets a shot. Why? Because he was runner-up? And if you explained it to me that was the case, okay, that's... All right, he almost made it. The guy who won lost. Okay, if that's what you're going to do, but at least present that to me. It's not perfect, but at least tell me that's the reason why. In what other way did he earn, that title shot? They could have had a number one contendership match on Raw the next week. We saw Ciampa face, Lashley. So that week, why couldn't AJ have beaten The Miz in a one-on-one match?
And it's not to say that the match was bad. It's just saying what's the logical storytelling reason why it happened. But again,
the same thing with Mox. There was nothing that made me believe that AJ Styles was going to take the belt off of Bobby Lashley because there was no story behind it.
I mean, I didn't think he was going to win, but I think Ciampa and AJ had a better shot at taking that belt off of Lashley than anybody has against Moxley, with the exception of Punk.
That I 100% will agree with.
But this is what I'm saying. So while you want to talk about how the ranking system has been thrown out the window, even though WWE doesn't have a ranking system, we clearly see that here was the rules. You win this, you earn a title shot.
But
you didn't win this, but you get one anyway.
I said this from the beginning. The WWE has always played by their own rules when it comes to number one contenders. They never back themselves into the corner to say that someone had to earn it. AEW very early on backed themselves into the corner and said, whoever challenges for the world title has to earn it. They have to rise their way through the rankings, and they've gone away from that so many times. I can forgive the WWE a little bit more than I can forgive AEW because, in kayfabe sense, they haven't backed themselves into that corner. Did I like that whole situation with AJ? Absolutely not. I would have preferred that AJ Styles won a match, won the number one contendership, and got the shot the next week. That would have made total sense to me, and it would have been way better of an explanation. But, like I said, WWE hasn't backed themselves into the same corners as AEW did, so I am a little bit more forgiving. Would I prefer it the other way? Absolutely. It's like I said, there are a lot of things about this new era that I'm willing to give a chance to. Okay, so that was 1 week of a mistake that he made. There are probably a bunch more that if I really went into it, I probably could have seen of things that I don't like. But for the first time in a while, the positives seem to be outweighing the negatives. And I think we're finally getting that switch in WWE and AEW, where the positives of WWE are starting to outweigh the negatives, and the negatives for AEW seem to be starting to outweigh the positives.
Okay, now, but while we're talking about earning championships and divisions, now let's see how much Albert has changed. Let's see how much the new Albert has evolved.